Welcome back to your Digital Marketing Arm podcast. I'm a host, Jus Capstana, and if you listen to this right now, I want to begin with a simple acknowledgement. You are most likely not a beginner. You're not someone who is still trying to understand the basics of business or how to grow an audience or how to set up your first funnel or how to define an ICP for the first time. You are beyond that chapter. You are probably a founder, a CEO, a senior operator, or an advisor responsible for guiding a company where the decisions made today equal 3, 5, 10 years into the future. And because of that, you already understand the metrics matter, data matters, strategy matters, and measurement matters. But today we're going to talk about something deeper than metrics, deeper than dashboards, deeper than attribution software, and deeper than operational visibility. Because while we live in an era where businesses are drowning in analytics and instant reporting, many still remain starved of meaning. So let's talk about something the very few founders or CEOs are taught. Yet it quietly determines the gap between businesses that scale sustainably and business that scale chaotically or not at all. So we're going to explore what it looks like to evolve from a data-dependent operator to a discernment-driven leader. And before we dive in, let me clarify one thing. I'm not here to convince you to abandon metrics. I'm not here to promote intuition without evidence. Definitely not here to push the narrative that gut feeling is all you need. This isn't about choosing between data or intuition. This is about learning to lead with both intelligently, consistently, and in alignment with your long-term vision. So because CEOs who lead only with data often end up reactive, constantly adjusting based on what happened yesterday rather than designing confidently for the future. And CEOs who lead only with intuition eventually face blind spots that could have been prevented with better visibility. So today, let's talk about what it truly means to move from metrics to meaning. Let's start with something simple. If I asked you right now, which metric or insight directly reflects the health and maturity of your customer, of your experience, would you know the answer within 5 seconds without opening a report, asking a team, or checking a dashboard? Most leaders can answer questions about revenue, followers, lead volume, or traffic, but ask about interpretive meaning, not just visible numbers, and things get quieter. That's not because executives are uneducated. It's because the business world has conditioned leaders to prioritize visible data over meaningful interpretation. It's the difference between learning to read and learning to understand the text beyond the words. In ancient wisdom literature, there is a continuous theme: knowledge is information, wisdom is interpretation. And in business, the same applies. Data is information, discernment is interpretation. So let's talk about metrics for a moment. Numbers feel safe, they feel objective, they feel tangible, and there is a sense of comfort in being able to say, we measure it, therefore we understand it. A measurement and understanding are not the same thing. You can measure trend and still not understand why people leave. You can measure conversion rates and still not know what prevented the sale. You can measure traffic growth and still not know whether the market perceives you as a true category leader or simply another option. So your metrics tell you what happened. Discernment tells you what it means, why it happened, and what to do next. That's the shift, So let's unpack why this matters so much right now. For the last 5 years, organizations have been told that data-driven is the highest standard of leadership. Data-driven without discernment creates, first, reactive decision-making, second, misdiagnosed problems, fragmented investments, premature scaling, copy and paste strategies, and artificial confidence. It's like navigating using coordinates without knowing the terrain. So you might be moving, yeah, but not necessarily progressing. What we actually need, it's not data-driven leadership. It's data-supported, discernment-led leadership. A leader who looks at numbers, not at commands, but as clues. Let me bring this down to something practical. Think about your dashboard right now. Whether you are using HubSpot, Salesforce, Looker, Snowflake, ClickUp, Notion, or Customer BI environment, you probably have between 12 and 80 metrics you can access at any time. But out of those, only 4 to 8 actually matter strategically. And out of those, only 2 to 5 measure meaning, not performance. So let me ask you something that most leaders avoid asking themselves. Are you measuring what matters, or are you simply measuring what is available? So this is a big difference. There's a big difference. And that difference is where competitive advantage quite lives. So let's move into where CEOs get stuck. Most leaders think they have a data problem, when in reality, they have a meaning problem. Here's what that looks like in real life. So they track acquisition, not perception change. They track sales, but not decision-making friction. They track engagement, not audience maturity. They track NPS, but not emotional resonance. They track trend, but not identity-based alignment. They track time to close, but not time to trust. And now the AI systems can accelerate workflows, generate insights, and run complex analysis at speed. The risk is even greater because automation doesn't fix interpretation. It multiplies it, which means if your interpretation is correct, AI accelerates impact. If your interpretation is wrong, AI accelerates misalignment. This is why discernment has become a strategic advantage. All right, let's talk about discernment then. Discernment is not intuition alone. It's intuition informed by truth, patterns, history, alignment, and consequence. Discernment is the ability to identify what matters most when everything looks urgent. And I want you to think about this. Not everything that grows is healthy. Not everything that is low is failing, and not everything that looks profitable is scalable. Not everything that looks efficient is stable. Discernment is executive skill that separates immediate opportunity from long-term wisdom. It's the difference between reacting and designing. And when you learn to integrate both data and discernment, decision-making shifts from what does this metric say to what does this mean relative to where we are going. So let's look at a real scenario. a SaaS company, so rapid MQL growth, increased demo requests, and strong webinar attendance. Their dashboards looked positive, so they increased paid campaigns, expecting proportional revenue growth, but the closed one numbers didn't move. Now, a data on leader says something is wrong with sales. A discernment-led leader says we are attracting interest, not readiness. Let's evaluate message marked congruence. The issue wasn't size. It was audience maturity and positioning quality. They were attracting volume, not aligned buyers. So the strategy wasn't to push harder. It was to clarify meaning. And once that was fixed, sales volume increased without needing additional acquisition spend. So that's the difference between numbers and interpretation. So let's talk about meaning-based metrics. Here are examples of metrics that leaders rarely measure but should. So frustration lag, the hidden time between when a customer first experience friction and when they express it. Perception elevation, how much a prospect's belief about your category or methodology evolves throughout the journey. And trust velocity, how quickly a qualified prospect moves from awareness to emotional belief. Decision make confidence, not just did they convert, but how confident and aligned did they feel when deciding? Identity compatibility, how deeply your product or methodology aligns with who they are becoming, not who they were when they entered the funnel. These are not vanity metrics. These are long-term scalability indicators, because when meaning increases, marketing becomes easier, sales becomes shorter, retention becomes natural, and innovation becomes clear. Now let's bring in the conception of behavioral data versus strategic data. Most companies are tracking behavioral data. Clicks, opens, comments, bookings, watch time, downloads, but fewer track strategic data. Belief shift, narrative alignment, perceived values versus actual value, expectations, clarity, emotional certainty. Behavior data tells you what people did. A strategic data tells you what people understood. And in high-value business environments, understanding drives revenue far more than behavior. Let's transition into leadership identity. If you are leading a company, you are not just managing data, you are shaping meaning. Your real responsibility is not to make decisions based only on what is visible, but on what is true, stable, aligned, and strategically sound. There is a concept in ancient literature where leaders are encouraged to seek wisdom over knowledge, because knowledge solves today's moment, while wisdom designs tomorrow's foundation. It's the invitation to lead not only with sight, but with insight. And in business, insight is where future advantage is born. So what does it look like to evolve into a discernment-led CEO? It means learning to pause before reacting, to interpret before optimizing, to identify the real diagnosis before assigning the strategy. A discernment-led CEO asks different questions like, what's the real constraint here? What's the meaning behind this signal? What future consequence does it create? What does this data not yet reveal? What belief or perception needs to shift first? This is where competitive edge gets built, not in the systems, not in the dashboards, but in the leader's mental model. So let's move into something practical. Try reflecting on these three prompts as a leader. Where are we measuring activity instead of meaning? Which metrics influence tactical decisions? And which ones influence strategic direction? Where is our organization overanalyzing data but interpreting human behavior? Because scaling is not a data exercise, it's a human alignment exercise validated by data. Okay, let's talk about your company. If I asked your executive team right now, what does success mean not just in numbers, but in impact, identity, and alignment, would they answer the same way? If not, you don't have a data problem. You have a meaning gap. And meaning gaps eventually become culture gaps. Culture gaps become experience gaps. Experience gaps become retention gaps. Retention gaps become revenue gaps. This is how small misalignment becomes large costs. Let's close with this. Data is essential. Systems are essential. Dashboards are essential. Technology is essential. But leadership is meaning making, and meaning making requires the ability to see beyond the numbers. When you learn to integrate data with discernment, you build a company that is not only measurable, but meaningful, not only scalable, but stable, not only efficient, but wise. And that's how you build a business that doesn't just win the next quarter, but the next decade. All right. The next episode, we're going deeper into something many leaders feel but rarely articulate. Clarity is not created by more information, it's created by better interpretation. And I'm going to walk you through how to develop executive interpretation models that your organization can use across marketing, product, sales, and talent and customer success. So your company does not just collect data, but becomes intelligent with it. Well, I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening. And thank you for building business that matter.